Good evening. My name is Dr. Warren Dockter. I'm the President and CEO of the East Tennessee Historical Society. And I would just like to welcome everybody in this evening. Thank you so much for joining us at the East Tennessee History Center and being a part of Charlie's book launch. I really appreciate that. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today is I'm going to say a few words and then I'm going to invite Dooley up to say a few words about this book. And the book itself, I should say before I start, was published by the University of Tennessee Press, which is here in the corner. So if we wave to them. And it was a sort of a joint venture, I guess, in many ways between East Tennessee Historical Society and the University of Tennessee Press. And I was very proud to work with Charlie, and we were very proud to support Charlie in this undertaking, which was really amazing. And so the book itself is out of the Smokies, and you'll get to read all about it in a moment. But what I'd like to do while I'm here and to introduce Dooley really is to talk a little bit about my time with Charlie and working on the book itself. Charlie and I met originally because we needed a website for the East Tennessee Historical Society, which is how I met Brooke Duncan, who's there at the back. And I got to work with the Tombras company, which is so amazing. And I met with Charlie, and Charlie and I were at Cherokee Country Club, and we started talking about Colorado, and that his eyes lit up, and we became best friends after that. And one of the things, we were out talking about the website, and he told me he'd found out that I'd worked with Boris Johnson on his book about Winston Churchill, and he had asked if I'd have a look at his manuscript, his memoirs, and I said I'd be happy to. And he gave them to me, and I came back to him, after a few months of reading them, and I came back and said, Charlie, unlike most people that come to me with books, this is actually really good. And I said, with a little work, we could tighten this up, and I'm pretty sure somebody would publish this. So we agreed to go kind of through chapter of his book, working it. And one of the things that really impressed me, Charlie was a reader, and we were just talking about that. Charlie, I read through it, and I said, there's a writer, a kind of obscure writer not many people know about, named John Williams, who sort of sounds like you. It'd be worth you reading his book, Stoner. I don't know if anyone's ever read Stoner by John Williams. But he did. He came back. I recommended it to him, and about a month later, he came back and said, Warren, I've read it, and I've started incorporating some of the beats and stuff from his writing. And I was amazed, and it really, the book started to take off, and I got to learn so much about Charlie through work with his book, because, of course, this is stories of his life. So much of East Tennessee shines in this book in his early life, going into the Smokies before the park was there. It was really incredible to learn not just about Charlie, but about East Tennessee and about what I'm going to say is an East Tennessee spirit. And that was amazing to me. I got to learn that he met Ernest Hemingway, which is huge for me. I'm a huge Hemingway fan. He survived polio. There are so many things. He still holds so many world records for fishing. And I told Charlie going into this, I don't know anything about fly fishing. It looks cool. He was so worried about, is this too fishing forward? Are we focusing too much on the fishing? And fishing is at the heart of the book, but it's also a metaphor for life. And the fact that I don't know anything about fly fishing or making the little bugs or anything. That's not even what you call them. I think lures is the actual term. See, I'm embarrassing myself. The fact that I don't know anything about that tells you that this book is, I think, genuinely really amazing, because so much of it is about the heart and about his journey. I sort of got to discover Dooley through his work. Dooley, I've only really hung out a little bit, but I feel like I know Dooley because, in a way, I saw him grow up through Charlie's eyes. And I can tell you, he is so proud of Dooley, and he's so proud of Dooley's family, and that his grandchildren are some of the reasons that he wanted to write this book, to leave something behind so they can read it and learn about him. And of course, his love, Brenda, she comes across so greatly in the book, as well as Dooley's mother. And so much of Charlie was packed into this. And of course, him being an adventure person and a businessman. And in fact, one of the things we had to leave out was the business. He couldn't focus so much on the business because his own story was so big. And so I had gone down, or this was sort of slightly before that. I want to break and say this. I was so excited. I went to Antarctica with my father at the beginning of this year. And I got to go to where Charlie talks about Tierra del Fuego. And I actually went to the place there where he fished. And I was so proud to come back and tell him that I had been to the end of the world, Fin del Mundo, I think it's called, where he was at. And I was really excited to share that with Charlie. And that was one of the last conversations that we got to have. But he had asked me in the interim if I could write the history of the Tombras business. And I told him I'd be honored to do that because it's really an East Tennessee story. It's a story about East Tennessee business. And you'll get to read all about it in the book, so I'm not going to give you any spoilers. But the headline is, and he has an international company. And I mean that in a true, at the greatest, highest level. I know one of our guests here tonight also knows about that. And he kept his headquarters here in Knoxville and in East Tennessee because he believed in East Tennessee. And I think that's fundamentally so at the center of what East Tennessee is that genuinely it sort of overwhelms me. I think it's beautiful. And I tried to get that across in the story about the Tombras business, which I begin by saying actually starts on a tiny island in the Mediterranean and is here now in Knoxville. And it's just such a remarkable story. And I'm glad that I got to help craft it, and I'm glad that I got to be a part of it. And so now I'm going to hand over to Dooley Tombras, who's got some words, I think, prepared. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren, and thank you to the East Tennessee Historical Society and the University of Tennessee Press and all the friends that are here today. And it is a bittersweet day, obviously. The plan was not for me to be speaking today. This was an event that Dad was really looking forward to. And I do have good news. I feel like most of you all came to his funeral, so you've seen me do his eulogy before. You're not going to have to watch me stand up here and talk about Dad a lot again today. You're going to hear it from his words, because honestly, one of the last things, the speech that he was going to plan to give today. So you're going to get to hear me say that. But I mean, just to say a few things about Dad. After he passed away and the obituary was posted, hundreds of people reached out, but really kind of one of the most common things people said to me was, Charlie Tombras really was the most interesting man in the world. And if you don't think that's true, I really encourage you to read the book, because Dad had some amazing stories and they were all true. So instead of me talking more about Dad, I think I'll just, speak from his words here. So this is the speech that Dad literally intended to give today. So it'll sound like it's coming from me, but this is coming straight from Dad. Some of you might expect this to be an autobiography about my life in advertising. After all, I ran an ad agency called Tombras, which has been a part of East Tennessee's history for nearly 80 years. I was 24 when I joined my dad at Tombras, a smaller company in those nascent years. And as you might expect, driving growth became my greatest business passion. But beyond the ad agency, there was always something else. And at the age of 24 and just back from Vietnam, I realized there was a longing deep within, something always there pulling at me from the time of my youth, even today, nearly 3/4 of a century later, that I remember that young boy, how it started, an unusual chain of events, and the place it all began. I was 7 years old, following my dad into the trout streams of the Smoky Mountains. It was the spring of 1948, still the early days of the national park, which was dedicated by President Roosevelt at the ceremony in Newfound Gap in September of 1940. And the year was in June 1948. I attended a boys' camp. Nothing unusual about that, except it was very unusual as it was located inside the national park up near Elkmont. It was 2 months every summer for 5 straight years until I was 12. We hiked the Smokies and we camped by firelight, often on mountain tops or the high mountain meadows, places like Andrews, Gregory, or Siler's Bald. As I recall, the clear, cool nights atop those mountain balds, gazing up from my bedroll into the heavens and the Milky Way. The mountains were vast and the universe so immense, and the boy felt so small within it. We fished the swift waters and learned how to swim in the crystal clear water of a cold mountain lake. We rode horses on the trails of the Smokies. We shot real .22 rifles at the firing range. And after the ball games and well toward the evening, we listened to the call of the whippoorwills as they were summoning 1,000 fireflies, sparks of blue light rising in the night, flashing in unison and sparkling like some far-off galaxy. It was a magical time for a kid, and each day was a new adventure. After Camp LeConte, at age 12, my heart burned for even more freedom in the mountains, and my parents allowed me to fly fish the Smokies on my own, on day trips. At the age of 13, I was allowed to do overnights on my own. I was euphoric. By 14, I was a young Mark Twainish kind of kid exploring the backcountry of the Smokies on my own or with a friend, often for a week or even 10 days at a time. There was no designated backcountry campsites or permits like today. In fact, there weren't many people either. All I needed was my backpack, a few supplies, a topo map, a compass, and a fly rod. I made my own decisions on where to go, where to fish, and where to clear a little stone campfire and makeshift camp before the darkness set in. To a young boy, these treks in the mountains were adventures of high magnitude, and the early stories in the book are through the eyes of that kid. It's now clear to me that it was my zeal for the outdoors and adventure that eventually led me into endeavors like powerboat racing, jumping out of airplanes, week-long unguided treks in the Alaskan tundra in search of trout, and the quest for world record marlin on the oceans of the world with a fly rod. Whitewater paddling, self-exploring wild rivers beyond the most northernmost road in Canada with my son Dooley, even a couple of rivers that had never been paddled before. All of these are the stories in the book. From Out of the Smokies is at its very essence a story of freedom and adventure. Not all these adventures involved fly fishing or even the outdoors. Profound experiences just seemed to follow me through all facets of my life. From my first day of school, family, hopes, marriage, dreams, and tragedy, a military academy and high school, and the greatest of my life lessons I learned from a teacher there, infantry officer basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, the discipline and higher standards of being a paratrooper, the extreme physicality, sleep deprivation, and near starvation of ranger training, the Vietnam War, and starting over afterwards. These are the stories in the book. I've been asked many times why I wrote it, and I've given that question thought, and I always find myself drifting back to something I heard from my grandmother, and she would tell me quite often, actually. She used to say how sad it was that so many people died with all their songs still inside of them. And I think it was her way of telling me that the beautiful songs people have within them are their stories, which are lost forever when they die, never to be retold. Of course, the hard part is just getting them all down before they slip away. So I wrote From Out of the Smokies, a story about a little kid growing up in the park. It's a story about learning. It's a story about youth and a journey that led to a young man out of the Smokies to some of the most remote, pristine, wild places on earth. Looking back, I now know that I accompanied my dad in the Smokies, not because he asked me to. I followed my dad because I respected him, I admired him, and I wanted to be like him. Beyond that, I wondered if there was something I could learn from the forest and clear rushing streams, something to help make sense of the world I now found myself a part of. Sure enough, the mist-covered mountains and the wild trout were fascinating, even mysterious in a good way, and I was anxious to unravel the mystery. But even beyond that, there was something else I observed about my dad. I never once saw him more vibrant, accessible, and alive than when he was on a trout stream or on his way to one. And I was determined to discover just what it was about the Smoky Mountain rivers that gave him that kind of joy and contentment. I was asked to read something today, and I've chosen a segment from one of the early chapters entitled The Bandit and the Backcountry, a story of one of those childhood treks. This one started in Cades Cove in Tennessee and went high up and across the very spine of the Smokies and down into the backcountry of western North Carolina, to a place called Eagle Creek with a good friend since fourth grade at Bearden Grammar School, Dwayne Dunlap, who's actually here somewhere today. So this is an excerpt from the book. Somewhere in the riffles and eddies flowing swift beneath the mountain laurel, there was meaning to it all. There had to be. And at our young age, we fished this stream and all the headwater creeks as if we were driven to find it. If not in the pool below the waterfall, then the next or the next. We fished on, but we never found it. And yet we knew it was always there, swirling beneath each boulder, stirring in the pebble depths of each dark pool, waiting in the shadows beneath the cool hemlock, further up the river and around each bend. Higher and higher into the great Smokies, where the blue mist hovered and the pure water sprang forth from the coolness of the earth. We were young and strong, and we fished mile after mile that day as if we were in a trance, with no idea that any other moment existed besides the one on this backcountry stream. So I didn't understand it at the time, but my direction was set and my path was marked. And throughout my life, there was this longing for the wilderness of high country and the clear, cold rivers. From Out of the Smokies is a book about what is there, deep inside of me. The years in the Smokies when I first tasted freedom and felt adventure and realized from that time on my life would be different than other men. I thank my publisher, the University of Tennessee Press, for taking on this book. Thank you, Tom, Katie, Walt, and Malia for your confidence. I've been asked what was the most difficult challenge that I encountered while writing my life story, and it was not what you might expect. For me, it was weaving together stories from my business life, running an ad agency, with stories of adventure. And it just wasn't working. Each seemed to somehow diminish the other. I was having lunch with my friend Warren Dockter one day, and he mentioned this. Warren is a published author, and he said, Charlie, adventure stories are written in a certain tone of voice, and business stories are written in quite another. And it can be jarring for the reader to encounter two different voices in one book. And then Warren suggested, why not have somebody else write the story of Tombras and put that at the end of the book, and you write the adventure stories that only you can tell. And I felt weight lift off my shoulders, and it was at that moment I knew for sure the book could actually be finished. The upshot in an autobiography told through the adventures of my life and the unlikely way it all started, all these stories are in my own voice. No ghostwriters or freelancers were used. And there's a complete story in the epilogue, too, entitled Against All Odds, the story of the Tombras Group. Thank you, Warren, and the East Tennessee Historical Society for hosting this event, and thank you for writing the epilogue. By the way, there are several people that were mentioned in the book: Bill Sansom, Sam Furrow, Tim Keller, Graham Hunter. Graham is the founder of Custom Foods, a large Knoxville company supplying North America's leading restaurant chains. And I cannot close without acknowledging the friends who encouraged me to write this. John Emmert. John grew up in Townsend at the edge of the park, a son of the Smokies. You'll find him in one of the chapters from Alaska entitled Nightmare at Dream Creek. Joe Congleton, who shared with me a thing or two about cantankerous wild turkeys and exceptionally large trout. Thank you for your friendship, Joe. My lifelong friend, Edgar Faust. Our families have hunted and fished together for 3/4 of a century and 4 generations. Edgar grew up in Elkmont, learned to pack mules in the backcountry of Wyoming's Wind River Range, hunted grouse in places most people could never even find, and is by far and away the most well-rounded outdoorsman I ever met. Graham Hunter, I already mentioned. Graham is a business leader here, but I should say we shared wonderful days together on the streams of the Smokies, Montana, and Colorado since the mid-1960s. And most of all, I acknowledge my wife, Brenda, who I love very much. Brenda cared for me night and day for 6 months when I was at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, and I wrote the majority of From Out of the Smokies from a hospital bed. Without Brenda as my caregiver and without her acknowledgement, this book most certainly would not have been finished. Also, many thanks to Brenda's son, John Trotter, Molly, and John Charles, who are here. And then I would especially like to recognize and thank my son, Dooley, for writing the afterword. By far the greatest honor of my life was to work closely sorry, hard for me to read this one. By far the greatest honor of my life was to work closely with my dad and then to work later with my son Dooley, as this is the best part for me to live long enough. So it's hard to read his words about me. I wasn't prepared for that, y'all. I'll take a beat there. And this is the best part for me to live long enough to see Dooley and the superpower team he assembled at Tombras accomplish something truly epic in the ad business. A lot of people from Tombras are here today, by the way. In less than 10 years, to grow an already substantial 100-person agency in Knoxville into the largest family-owned agency in the world with 500 employees and offices in New York, Atlanta, and Buenos Aires. Some very smart consultants in the ad industry said that couldn't be done in Knoxville, but we did it, y'all. So, and then lastly, Dad wanted to acknowledge my beautiful wife, Kiri, and his grandsons Rex and Roman, who are here. And Warren said this earlier, but that is really the whole reason that Dad wrote this book, was so that his stories would live on. And then also Dad wanted to make a note that if anybody is inspired to buy this, the proceeds are going to the Tombras School of Advertising and Public Relations at the University of Tennessee. So those are Dad's words there. So I didn't think that was going to get me at the end, but I got a little emotional there. But I'm glad y'all didn't have to hear me give another speech about Dad today. And for those people at the agency, y'all know Dad planned ahead a lot more than I did. I usually write speeches about the day before. Fortunately, he wrote this one a couple months out, and so I was able to share his words today. So again, thank you all very much for being here. I do think you'll enjoy the book. There's some pretty amazing stories in there, and Warren and everybody, thank y'all.
Thank you all. You're welcome to help yourself to more food and drinks and have a fun. That's pretty much our portion for the show. Thank you for attending the launch. I think we may be sold out of books already. Is that? If not, there may be still some available out front if you don't have a copy. And if you don't have one and we are sold out, we'll be sure to get you one very soon. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.